All right.
All right. So I think we've got it going. So I want to introduce Jeff Means, who's been a longtime friend of mine who got me. I don't know if you got me into this crazy mess, but my
Definitely didn't
first
get the mail.
day, John Sparby said, go down to talk to Jeff Means. I was like, what? So Jeff came right out of West Point and the military, went to Accretive Health back when there was only there wasn't even a contract, I don't think, right? There wasn't even a contract. So it was like 5 people. And then him and I worked together for several years, really close. And then started to do more product development at Accretive, right? And then left Accretive probably 5 years ago.
Right. Right
Five
on.
years ago. Formed a company called Colburn Hill, and those guys do consulting and Jeff has built I think an incredible platform for automation in the billing follow-up space, which I don't know if anyone's really said. They said they've done, but they probably haven't done to the level. And I think one of the smartest minds in RevCycle. And so I asked him to join me today to talk a little bit about failure and how we can learn from it and move forward. And so I'll get some of his thoughts on that. If you checked out my last video, a couple of videos ago, we talked a little bit about failure and how it's just a kind of key cornerstone to, I think, kind of, taking your ideas even further. So, Jeff, I wanted to start a little story. I'm sure Mary's not going to watch this, but if she did, she would appreciate this. She probably doesn't remember. I don't know if you remember this, but Mary Tolan, who was CEO of Accretive Health, would do these things called site reviews. So anyone watching this, it was Accretive, you may have just had an anxiety attack just hearing that word, but but basically it was just, at the beginning, it was really like, how do we continue to challenge someone who's not in your business every day? And it was actually, really worthwhile. But all the time she'd come up with these ideas, right? And I get it. She didn't know, and it was crazy. But she just came with this idea of we really wanted to keep people's attention so they wouldn't leave the ER without getting copay. This is back when copay collection was unheard of, right? So I don't know if you remember this, but she's like, I got an idea. Let's keep everyone's driver's license at the beginning when you register them, and then they won't leave. They won't leave the ER, and they'll be like a captive audience. You'll have to be able to collect from them. I don't know. Does this ring a bell?
Absolutely. I remember this.
So Janelle, shout out to Janelle Harmon, who was the manager in the ED at that time. We go down there. We're like, all right, well, we'll try it. It sounds ludicrous, but let's try this. Guess how many licenses we had left at the end of the
day? A new license costs a lot less than a copay.
We had 57 licenses left at the end of the day. 57. It's what are we gonna do with these licenses? Now we're gonna find these people. It was a mess. We only did it one day. It was I don't think we can do this anymore. So anyways, it was one of those things where we failed, but it was trying to figure out how can we continue to get people's attention in that space. And it's so you just, you had to try stuff. So I was curious, on this, especially the tool you built, what are some things maybe you failed along the way, and just how have you used that experience to propel it to maybe something even better? So I just thought I'd start with that story.
No, it's a good story. And actually, I just want to take a second to tell you how honored I am to be the first person to come to mind when you think about failure. Really,
well, who better? Who better? That's what I said.
No, that story, it really happened. And it was not a successful idea, but in general, there is a good principle around making a discharge process from the emergency room and having people checking out, and that's the right place to have that conversation. And it's certainly more effective, and people are in a better state of mind. It's a more customer centric than trying to do it on the way in, or as soon as you pass the EMTALA requirements and whatnot. So
EMTALA, that doesn't matter.
Well, there's that.
Not supposed to say that.
But No, but I think it's good. It's a good story to kind of illustrate the entrepreneurial process. And if you're trying to make a change to the status quo, sometimes it's good to swing the pendulum a long way the other direction. It breaks habits. It breaks, like, if you're in a rut of just doing what everybody else is doing, it's good to kind of get yourself out of that rut and clear the air to think of things in a new way. Um, you asked about, some personal examples of failure and where they led to. Um, I'll tell kind of the story of how you mentioned our product around automating back office tasks. And this is a path I've been on for more than a decade at this point. And I've tried to go down this path using different technologies, using different techniques for 10 years, and have hit the wall a number of times. It's not just me. If you look at over the last like 3 or 4 years, where are the new technologies and revenue cycle management coming from? Nearly all of the innovations have been around patient experience and population health. There's been very little innovation in the back office.
Right.
And I think it's just emblematic. Like, everybody has run into this wall. And I think particularly when it comes to this back office and automation, you do have people stuck in that rut. And so you do need to swing the pendulum to the other side to get people out of the rut. Mm-hmm. Catalyst for me was 3.5, 4 years ago, reading about robotic process automation as, the new buzzword. I think it was officially dubbed the buzzword of 2017 or something like that. Maybe my timing's a little bit off. That's about when I started paying attention to it. But companies like Recondo started using that term and using it in their own operation. And today there's a whole bunch of firms that use robotic process automation. There's firms that specialize in it. And I would say most of these firms have found themselves into a new rut. And they're all kind of doing the same thing. The initial pitches are, we'll automate anything. And so provider says, well, what can you automate? And then our PA vendor says, well, we can automate anything. And you go around in a circle a bit when you have that conversation. But this buzzword, and, there were several like regional HFMA events that spotlighted this. It kind of got people out of this rut of, we're going to use 277 claim status, and that's going to be our path to automation. It got people out of that rut and there's been a number of innovations, and people are doing new and better things, but it changed my thinking about how you can automate back office tasks. And so we went down this path, and we've used robotic process automation. I don't need to take you through all the details, but where I am today is using a combination of analytical processes combined with the robotic process automation. And when you have the two together, then you can do truly scalable things and not just custom software for one client to solve one particular problem, but in a scalable way, you can approach the back office tasks and look. And in our case, we're achieving about 50% automation of follow-up tasks.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It's good stuff, but maybe just to kind of summarize the journey, though, right? My own journey on this over a 10-year period, I've been pursuing automation of AR follow-up, third-party follow-up, and tried a number of different ways at a couple of different companies, and would get some traction. And traction is a positive feedback loop. And so you go down a path, and then eventually you hit the limits of whatever technique you're applying. And that's kind of this hitting the wall or being stuck in that rut analogy. And so you need to try something new. And if you're afraid to fail, then the scope of ideas that you'll come up with trying something new will be very limited. If you're more open to failure, the scope of things that you're willing to try will be much broader, and you'll have a better chance at success. It's not just the willingness to fail, but it's the willingness to fail repeatedly, right? And sometimes you need to fail repeatedly and repeatedly to finally get to the right, get yourself out of that rut and try something new that's successful.
So what's something specific like that comes to mind that you maybe tried to do and just was like, this isn't working at all? But like you had to take a leap to faith to kind of like even attempt it. Like what would be something that, without boring everybody, like what would be something like specific? I don't know. I'm just trying to get to.
Yeah. I think everybody could relate to coordination and benefits denials. This is something that happens everywhere. And there's a whole bunch of techniques you can use to try to prevent them from happening. And none of those techniques are 100% foolproof. And, because insurance eligibility checks pre-service, things change. And some payers' data is out of date. There's emergency room processes that prevent you from being able to do it in the middle of the night or having all the right information to do it effectively. So there's lots of reasons why you can't prevent coordination of benefits denials universally. You're going to have some, and you have to have a process to clean them up.
For sure.
So we tried a number of ways to try to automate fixing these. And if you were to just interview somebody on their process of fixing coordination of benefits denials, they'll give you like, oh, there's just 3 simple decisions that you have to make. And what you find when you go actually try these decisions is that it's actually like dozens.
It's not 3 simple decisions.
Right, dozens of very particular decisions. And if it's a Medicare patient, then there's this other thing you have to consider. And if it's related to an accident, then you have to consider these other things. And so we went down a path of using analytical processes to say, here's what you need to do next. And we had to iterate and repeat going through this process of what is the decision-making process to get the right billing to happen over and over. And to take you, fast forward to today, we have a really slick algorithm that uses a lot of the traditional techniques, eligibility checking through 270, 271 transactions, scraping from insurance web portals, and then that capture of that human decision process that goes through a number of elements and iterates through a number of things, and then layers in a whole bunch of business rules that are specific to the circumstance of our client. And we can automate a significant portion of our coordination of benefits denials at this point.
Right.
We're more than a third of our coordination of benefits denials. We're using a fully automated process that's not dependent on human intervention to do it.
I think it's important to highlight there. It's like if you would have just stopped at the first like roadblock, it would have been like, forget it. Right. You had to persevere through the number of iterations and failures to even get there, right? I mean, it had to be kind of like the progression. Otherwise, I don't think you wouldn't have gotten to where you're at today.
Yeah, and like the easiest thing to do would be, well, we're dependent on information from the payer, and it's their fault if they gave us out of date information or if the portal's down or
right.
because it's handled through a third party. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So it's easy to stop. Like we've reached the limit of what's inside of our control. And that's how you find yourself stuck in a rut, right? And that's how you end up doing, well, everybody else solved the problem this way, so we'll just do whatever they did and accept that limit.
Right. No, that's great. That's a good example. I mean, it's like persevering even when it comes to be willing to fail. It seemed like the two things you were able to you have to be able to do to innovate to the level, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like you're saying. Those two things.
Absolutely. I'll give you a parallel story here. In my personal life, I am a volunteer youth leader. So I meet with high school kids on a weekly basis and provide mentoring and guidance, that kind of thing. And so I spend a lot of time with kids. It's like spending a lot of time with Ben Regal, actually.
Oh, really? Like I'm just waiting for the punchline. It's like you're mentoring people. Seems off, but
No,
hey,
but
whatever happens in Chicago, I don't know, man. It's like its own world.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
no,
Yeah,
but
mentoring kids.
what do high school kids love to do with people a few years older than them? They love to ask you the question, "What's the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you?"
Mm-hmm.
And I always have like the most boring answer to the question because I don't I don't get embarrassed about situations, right? Like it's part of my like personality has adopted this like
Right.
I'm going to try this and I might trip and fall on my face. And you know what? It's really not that embarrassing. As a 20-year gymnast, I am totally comfortable with falling on my face,
Yes.
getting up and doing it again.
Yeah, those who are not aware, Jeff was a gymnast in college. And how many concussions have you had? 17, is that right?
Yeah, nobody really knows.
Nobody,
Nobody, nobody
I'm
knows.
just saying. I'm just saying. All right, real quick, I want to end with one last question. You and I have both had people, visionary leaders, and visionary leaders tend to just come up with like crazy ideas. And 50 of which are like, that's nonsense, right? Right. One of which might be really good. Um, any thoughts on how you kind of vet crazy ideas without maybe trying all of them? I don't know.
Yeah,
That's been coming to mind a little bit recently.
yeah. I think even more broadly in instilling a learning environment in your organization, it's kind of the same process.
Mm,
Um, if you're like a department manager, you should be willing to go to your staff and your team and say, I want to hear your ideas. And generally what happens is there's a few people who are not afraid to fail and will suggest some of these ideas, and sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not practical,
right.
sometimes not specific enough to execute. And if you get generally the first ideas are just a version of ideas that have already been tried and failed because they're like top of mind close. And so I would recommend accept these ideas and try them. If it's something you just tried yesterday, then you don't need to try it again. But you need to kind of
Right.
like tease out like what's the real idea here,
Mm,
and try some new things, because what happens is the person who is willing to say, here's something we should try, if you like reinforce that and foster it, the other person who was less willing to take that risk begins to open up. And I mean, we've kind of said it a few times, but like you have to try dozens of things, and you have to be
right.
willing for most of those things to fail.
Right.
You don't like turn off your filter of like, is this smart? Or is this like way too expensive? Like you should leave that filter on. Like, is this a good idea and does this smell right? And as like the leader leading that process, you need to like take the idea and kind of like distill it to what is the nugget of something new and something different that may like knock us out of the rut, that may like pull this pendulum back and get us swinging in a different direction. And so there's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of an art there. Like the science part of it is,
Yeah.
if you try 102% succeed, well, then you do 100 if you want two good ideas, right? So
Yeah.
there's a science part of it. And then there's also like an art part of it, which is listening to people. And I know you're suggesting this because there's a nugget of an idea in there, and like scrubbing away the chat, like scrubbing it away to what
Right.
is the real nugget so that we can
It
harvest
might
it.
not be at the surface. It's got it, but it's like brings you to something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you'd, I couldn't. If, when Mary said the idea around collecting licenses, I wouldn't have predicted that it would fail as badly as it did. Honestly, I thought, well, yeah, I would want to keep my license, right? But then
Right.
you get to a different in an environment it was real. It's like, it didn't work. I would have never predicted it would have been this fail. It would failed as bad as it did. But it was an iteration to know that we needed to get people's like we need to capture that people. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, I think that's great. So, well, let's wrap. I want to say, if for those who are interested in spending more time with Jeff, he is going to be in person. It's like a comedy tour, but not really. It's like at the Leaders Forum event in spring, May 6th and 7th in Scottsdale. If you're interested, check out rcnleadersforum.com. I don't know, Jeff, any words on Leaders Forum? Any for people who are thinking about it? What would you say?
I'd say the Leaders Forum is a good way to knock yourself out of the rut of going to typical conferences where you have canned material that's 2 years old. And it's a way to meet some brilliant people, spend some dedicated time thinking about your business and how to knock your business out of whatever rut you're stuck in.
Oh, awesome. I didn't even script that. That was good. That's perfect.
So maybe the summary is get a bunch of concussions, be willing to fall on your face a number of times, have some corny jokes.
And don't stop falling on your face. Even if the concussions keep coming. Don't stop.
Story of my life.
That's right. That's story of Jeff's life. Well, Jeff, thanks for the time, man. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the viewers do. I know people are very excited about this one. So I appreciate the time, brother. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks.